The bruise-like shadow of impending dusk had just begun to settle over the dusty Wyoming horizon when Zara Byrne stepped off the stagecoach into the unforgiving territory of Promise Creek. Clutching her weathered carpet bag, the only possession she had left in the world. She squinted against the swirling dust, wondering if her humiliation had somehow branded itself upon her face for all to see. It was 1878, and at 26 years of age, Zara had been discarded by her husband of 8 years like yesterday's dishwater, all because her womb remained as barren as the stretches of badlands that surrounded this frontier town. Her mouth tightened at the memory of Henry's final words to her, delivered in front of his entire family as they sat in judgment. A woman who cannot bear children is of no use to a man building a legacy. The stagecoach rumbled away behind her, leaving her alone on the dirt road that served as Promise Creek's main street. Her sister's letter had promised sanctuary, but the town seemed anything but welcoming as Zara took in the weathered buildings, the saloon's tinny piano, and the curious stares of the locals. "You must be Eleanor's sister," came a gravelly voice. Zara turned to find a silver-haired woman studying her with sharp eyes. "Yes, madam. I'm Zara Byrne." "Martha Wilkes. I run the general store." The woman's gaze swept over Zara's travel-worn appearance. "Your sister's place is about a half-mile east, though I should warn you. Is something wrong with Eleanor?" Zara's heart quickened. Her sister's letters had grown infrequent over the past year. Martha's expression softened with pity. "Eleanor passed 3 weeks ago. Influenza took her quick. I sent a telegram, but I reckon it didn't reach you in time." The world tilted beneath Zara's feet. Eleanor, her last living relative, her final hope gone. She swayed slightly, clutching her bag tighter. "I'm sorry to deliver such news," Martha continued. "Her place has been sitting empty. Town council's been talking about what to do with it." Zara straightened her spine. "The property is mine now, is it not? I am her only family." Martha nodded slowly. "By rights, I suppose it is, but it's no place for a woman alone. Eleanor struggled even with her husband before he was killed in that mining accident." A gust of wind sent dust spiraling up the street, and Zara pulled her shawl tighter. "I have nowhere else to go, Mrs. Wilkes. I intend to make it work." The older woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, I can't stop you from trying, but these parts aren't kind to those who can't pull their weight." She gestured eastward. "Follow the creek path, small cabin with a blue door. Keys are under the flower pot." With a nod of thanks, Zara set off, fighting back the tears that threatened to overwhelm her. She had cried enough during the long journey west. Eleanor was gone, but at least she had left Zara a home, something Henry had made clear she no longer had with him once her barrenness had been confirmed by the Boston doctor. The cabin, when she found it, was modest, but sturdy, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn furniture, and a small lean-to addition that housed a bed. Outside stood a tiny barn, empty now save for some aging farm tools and a chicken coop that held no chickens. The surrounding plot of land showed signs of neglect. The vegetable garden had gone to seed, and weeds choked what might have once been flower beds. Zara sank onto the porch steps as the reality of her situation washed over her. She was alone in unfamiliar territory, with limited funds and no prospects. The skill of a lady's companion, the only employment she had known before her marriage, would find little use in a frontier town like Promise Creek. She allowed herself 10 minutes of despair before she stood, brushed off her skirts, and entered the cabin. There was no time for self-pity. The sun was setting, and she needed to see what provisions she had. The pantry held some flour, dried beans, and preserves that Eleanor must have put up before falling ill. Enough to last a few days if she was careful. There was a well outside, so water wouldn't be a problem. Firewood was stacked by the hearth. Zara lit the lantern and set about making the place habitable. She swept the floor, dusted the surfaces, and changed the musty bedding with the spare sheets she found in a trunk. By the time she had eaten a simple meal of bread and preserves, night had fallen completely. She sat in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Wyoming night. A coyote howled in the distance, and something scratched at the door. A raccoon, perhaps, or some other nocturnal creature investigating the cabin's new occupant. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by memories of the life she had lost and fears of the future that awaited her. Morning brought no relief. Zara rose with the sun, determined to assess her situation in daylight. The garden would need extensive work before it could produce anything edible. The well water was clean but required effort to draw. The chicken coop could potentially house birds again, but she would need to purchase them, along with feed. Her funds would not last long if she had to buy everything she needed to survive. She would need to find work in town, but what kind of employment would be available to a woman with her limited skills? Lost in her worries, she didn't hear the approaching rider until he was nearly upon her. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, her hand instinctively reaching for the small knife she kept in her pocket, another lesson from a harsh world. The rider reined in his horse at the edge of what passed for her yard. He was a broad-shouldered man, his face partially obscured by the brim of a well-worn hat. The morning sun caught in his dark beard, highlighting threads of silver. "Morning, madam," he called, his voice deep and measured. "Don't mean to startle you." Zara remained where she stood, her hand still on her knife. "Good morning. Can I help you with something?" He dismounted with the easy grace of a man accustomed to life on horseback. Up close, she could see he was older than she had first thought, perhaps in his late 30s. With lines etched around blue eyes that studied her with undisguised curiosity. "Name's Dawson Reed. I own the Circle R, north of here." He gestured vaguely toward the distant hills. "Your sister used to sell us eggs and vegetables. Heard from Martha Wilkes that you'd arrived to take over her place." "News travels fast," Zara observed dryly. The man Dawson offered a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Small town. Not much happens that everyone doesn't know by sundown." He glanced around at the neglected property. "Martha also mentioned you might be looking for work. I came to offer some." Zara raised an eyebrow, immediately suspicious. "What kind of work?" "My housekeeper left last month. Married a miner from over in Sweetwater." He shifted his weight, seemingly uncomfortable. "I've got 5 boys at home, and the place is turning into a pigsty. Need someone to cook, clean, maybe help with the mending. It's a full day's work, but I pay fair." 5 boys. The information stung like salt in a fresh wound. Here was a man blessed with the very thing her husband had divorced her for being unable to provide. "I see," she said, unable to keep the coolness from her tone. "And why would you offer such a position to a stranger?" Dawson's gaze was steady. "Decent help is hard to come by out here. Eleanor spoke well of you in her letters, said you were educated, capable. Figure that's recommendation enough." Zara weighed her options. Pride urged her to refuse, to find her own way without becoming beholden to anyone. But practicality whispered that his offer might be the difference between survival and starvation. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if you can manage it. I'll send a wagon for you at dawn." He hesitated, then added, "It's not charity, Mrs. Byrne. It's honest work that needs doing, and I'm willing to pay a fair wage for it." The use of her married name, a name she was no longer entitled to, brought a flush to her cheeks. "It's Miss Byrne now," she corrected him, "and I accept your offer, Mr. Reed. I'll be ready at dawn." He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and remounted his horse. "Until tomorrow, then." Zara watched him ride away, wondering what she had just committed herself to. 5 boys would mean chaos, mess, and constant reminders of her own failure. But it would also mean food on her table and money to repair Eleanor's cabin. She spent the rest of the day preparing for her new position, washing her spare dress and mending the hem that had torn during her journey. She arranged her few belongings neatly, determined to make Eleanor's cabin a proper home, however humble. When dawn broke the next morning, Zara was ready. She had packed a small bundle with essentials, locked the cabin door, and was waiting on the porch when she heard the approaching wagon. To her surprise, it wasn't Dawson Reed who drove the team, but a boy of perhaps 15, with his father's blue eyes and a shock of sandy hair. He pulled up before the cabin and nodded politely. "Morning, madam. I'm Zachary Reed. Pa sent me to fetch you." He hopped down and reached for her bundle. "This all you bringing?" For now, Zara replied, allowing him to help her onto the wagon seat. I don't know what to expect at your home. Zachary climbed back up beside her and flicked the reins. Pa says you'll be cooking and cleaning and such. Our last housekeeper, Mrs. Potts, she stayed in the room off the kitchen. It's small, but decent. And your brothers? What are they like? Zara asked, bracing herself against the wagon's jolting movement. Wild as mustangs, Pa says. There was affection in Zachary's tone. I'm the oldest at 15. Then there's Joseph. He's 13 and thinks he knows everything. Timothy's 10, Luke's 8, and Samuel's 6. Ma died when Samuel was born. The casual mention of his mother's death and its cause made Zara's breath catch. Another woman who had died trying to fulfill the one purpose society deemed worthy. I'm sorry about your mother, she said quietly. Zachary shrugged, but she caught the shadow that passed across his young face. Been a long time now. Pa's done his best, but he says we need a woman's touch around the place. He glanced at her sideways. You ever worked as a housekeeper before? Not exactly, Zara admitted. But I managed my own household for 8 years, and I'm a quick learner. The boy nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon following a winding trail that led away from town and deeper into the rolling grasslands. Eventually, the path curved around a stand of cottonwoods, and Zara caught her first glimpse of the Circle R. It was larger than she had expected, a 2-story ranch house built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and what appeared to be a workshop of some kind. A corral held several horses, and in the distance she could see cattle grazing on the hillsides. Home sweet home, Zachary announced as they approached, not fancy, but solid. As the wagon rolled into the yard, the front door of the house burst open, and 3 boys tumbled out, shouting and racing toward them. They skidded to a halt when they saw Zara, curiosity and wariness mingling in their expressions. Boys, came Dawson's voice as he emerged from the barn. Mind your manners. He strode over to the wagon and offered Zara his hand to help her down. His palm was calloused against hers, warm and strong. She withdrew her hand quickly once her feet touched the ground. Miss Byrne, he said with a nod, welcome to the Circle R. I hope the journey wasn't too rough. Not at all, Mr. Reed, she replied, aware of the curious eyes of the boys studying her. Your son was an excellent guide. Dawson turned to the assembled children. You've met Zachary. These are Joseph, Timothy, and Luke. Samuel's probably still hiding in the house. He looked at his sons sternly. Boys, this is Miss Byrne. She'll be keeping house for us. I expect you to show her the same respect you'd show me. The boys mumbled greetings, their gazes darting between their father and Zara with undisguised curiosity. Joseph, help your brother with the team. Timothy, Luke, show Miss Byrne to her room and help with her things. Dawson issued the commands with the ease of a man accustomed to running a household, then turned back to Zara. Once you're settled, I'll show you around the house, explain what needs doing. Zara followed the 2 younger boys into the ranch house, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The interior was spacious but showed clear signs of neglect. Muddy boot prints tracked across the wooden floor. Dishes were stacked haphazardly on the kitchen table, clothing draped over chairs and banisters. It was, as Dawson had warned, turning into a pigsty. Her room, as Zachary had mentioned, was small but clean, a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. A window overlooked the kitchen garden, which appeared to be in better shape than Eleanor's had been. Pa said to tell you that dinner's usually at 6, Timothy informed her as he set her bundle on the bed. And breakfast is whenever the roosters crow. Thank you, Zara replied, surveying her new domain. I'll be out shortly to begin work. The boys retreated, whispering to each other, and Zara sank onto the edge of the bed. What had she gotten herself into? 5 boys, a sprawling ranch, and a man whose very existence reminded her of her greatest failure. But there was no turning back now. She had made her choice, and she would see it through. She unpacked her few belongings, changed into her work dress, and tied a clean apron around her waist. Then, squaring her shoulders, She stepped out to face her new life at the Circle R. Dawson was waiting for her in the kitchen, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "Hope the room suits you," he said, setting the cup down. "It's not much, but it's private." "It's perfectly adequate," Zara assured him, her gaze sweeping over the chaos of the kitchen. "Perhaps you could show me around so I know what I'm dealing with." He led her through the house, pointing out what needed attention. The tour confirmed her initial impression. The place was in desperate need of a woman's touch. Dust had settled on every surface, laundry had piled up, and the pantry was in disarray. "The boys have been doing their best," Dawson explained as they returned to the kitchen, "but they've got chores outside, and I'm not much of a housekeeper myself." "I can see that," Zara said dryly, then immediately regretted her tone. "I apologize, Mr. Reed. That was unkind." To her surprise, he chuckled. "No need to apologize for speaking the truth, Miss Byrne. I didn't hire you for flattery." He paused, his expression turning serious. "I should warn you about Samuel. He's shy around strangers, especially women. His brothers say it's because he blames himself for his mother's death, though I've told him 1,000 times it wasn't his fault." Zara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I understand. I'll be patient with him." "I appreciate that." Dawson moved toward the door. "I've got work to do in the fields. The boys know their chores. If you need anything, Zachary can help you." After he left, Zara stood in the middle of the kitchen, momentarily overwhelmed by the task before her. Then, with a deep breath, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She began with the dishes, washing the stack that had accumulated and putting them away in the cupboards. She swept the floors, dusted the furniture, and sorted through the pile of laundry, setting aside what needed mending. By midday, the kitchen and main living area were beginning to look respectable. She was preparing a simple lunch of beans and cornbread when she felt eyes upon her. Turning, she found a small boy standing in the doorway, watching her warily. With his mop of dark curls and solemn blue eyes, he could only be Samuel. "Hello," Zara said gently, continuing her work to avoid startling him. "You must be Samuel. I'm Miss Byrne." The boy didn't respond, but he didn't run away either. Zara took that as a positive sign. "I'm making lunch," she continued conversationally. "Are you hungry?" A slight nod was her only answer. "Would you like to help me? I need someone to set the table." Samuel hesitated, then slowly entered the kitchen. Zara showed him where the plates and utensils were kept, and he began carefully placing them on the table. He didn't speak, but he stayed, his presence a silent acknowledgement of her place in the household. When the other boys and Dawson came in for lunch, they stopped short at the sight of the transformed kitchen and Samuel quietly helping. "Well, I'll be," Dawson said, his gaze moving from the clean room to his youngest son to Zara. "Seems you're a miracle worker, Miss Byrne." Zara felt a flush of pleasure at the praise, though she tried not to show it. "Hardly that, Mr. Reed. Just someone who knows how to organize a household." The meal was simple but satisfying. The boys, initially reserved, gradually warmed to her presence, especially when she showed interest in their activities and didn't scold them for their boisterous behavior. After lunch, she continued her work, tackling the upstairs bedrooms. Each boy had his own small room, all in various states of disarray. Dawson's room at the end of the hall remained closed, and she made no attempt to enter it. That was a boundary she would not cross without explicit permission. By the time she prepared dinner, a heartier meal of beef stew and biscuits, she was exhausted, but satisfied with her progress. The house already felt more like a home than a bachelor's disaster. Over the next few days, Zara settled into a routine. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and her afternoons cooking and mending. The boys gradually accepted her presence, though Samuel remained shy, speaking to her only when necessary and always in a whisper. Dawson was rarely in the house, busy with ranch work from sunrise to sunset. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but distant, treating her with the respect due an employee, but never engaging in personal conversation. It was nearly 2 weeks into her employment when the first real challenge arose. She was in the kitchen garden, harvesting vegetables for dinner, when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. Racing toward the sound, she found Timothy sprawled on the ground, his arm bent at an unnatural angle, with his brothers clustered around him in panic. "What happened?" she demanded, kneeling beside the injured boy. "Fell from the hayloft," Joseph explained, his face pale. "Pa's riding the north pasture with the hands." Zara assessed the situation quickly. "It's broken. We need to set it before he can be moved." She turned to Zachary. "Fetch me clean cloths, a straight piece of wood for a splint, and some of your father's whiskey." While Zachary ran to gather the supplies, Zara spoke soothingly to Timothy, who was biting his lip to keep from crying. "You're being very brave," she told him. "This will hurt, but it's necessary to make your arm heal properly." When Zachary returned with the requested items, Zara took a deep breath. She had set a broken arm once before, when one of the kitchen maids had fallen down the cellar stairs in her Boston home. It had been a clean break then, and it appeared to be a clean break now. "Joseph Luke." "Hold your brother steady," she instructed. "Timothy, drink a little of this. It will help with the pain." She let the boy take a small swallow of whiskey, then nodded to his brothers. With a swift, practiced motion, she pulled the arm straight, aligning the broken bone. Timothy's scream tore through the air, but she didn't falter, quickly binding the arm to the splint with the cloths. "It's done," she said, wiping the sweat from her brow. "Now we need to get him to the house." The boys carried their brother inside and laid him on his bed. Zara mixed a poultice of herbs from the kitchen garden to reduce the swelling and administered another small dose of whiskey to help Timothy sleep. It was late afternoon when Dawson returned, his expression thunderous when Zachary told him what had happened. He stormed into Timothy's room, where Zara was sitting beside the sleeping boy. "Why wasn't I told immediately?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. "There was no time," Zara replied calmly. "Your son needed immediate attention. The break was clean, and I've set it properly. He'll heal well if he rests." Dawson stared at her, then at his son's splinted arm. "You know how to set bones?" "I've done it before. My husband's cook broke her arm in a fall." The mention of Henry slipped out before she could stop it. Dawson's gaze sharpened. "Your husband? Martha said you were unmarried." "I was married. I am no longer." Zara stood, smoothing her apron. "If you'll excuse me, I need to prepare dinner." She brushed past him, aware of his eyes following her as she left the room. It was the first personal information she had shared since arriving at the Circle R, and she regretted it immediately. The last thing she needed was Dawson Reed's curiosity about her past. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Dawson found her in the kitchen, kneading dough for the next morning's bread. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her work for a moment before speaking. "I owe you my thanks," he said finally. "For Timothy's arm. Doc Wilson likely wouldn't have gotten here until tomorrow." Zara nodded, keeping her eyes on her task. "I did what was necessary." "You did more than that." He stepped into the kitchen, closer to her than he had ever been. "You knew exactly what to do. That's not common knowledge." She glanced up, finding his gaze intent upon her face. "As I said, I've had experience with such injuries. In your husband's house. It wasn't a question." "You don't speak of him." Zara returned to her kneading, her movements perhaps more forceful than necessary. "There's nothing to say. The marriage ended. I came west to stay with my sister." "Who had passed away before you arrived." Dawson's voice softened. "That must have been difficult." The gentleness in his tone nearly undid her. For weeks she had maintained her composure, focusing on work and survival rather than grief. But his simple acknowledgement of her loss threatened to crack the shell she had built around her emotions. "Life is often difficult, Mr. Reed," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "One adapts or one perishes." He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had a different quality to it, less the employer, more the man. "Dawson," he said, "if we're to speak of personal matters, you might as well use my given name." The invitation to familiarity startled her. She looked up, flour dusting her hands, to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Very well, Dawson, she replied, testing the name. And you may call me Zara if you wish. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Zara. It suits you. Unusual name. My mother had unusual tastes. Zara shaped the dough into a loaf and set it in a pan to rise. Was there something else you needed, Mr. Dawson? He seemed to remember himself then, straightening from his relaxed posture against the counter. Just to check if you need anything, for Timothy or for the house. We're well supplied for now. Timothy should stay in bed for at least another day, though I doubt he'll be happy about it. He'll do as he's told, Dawson assured her. He hesitated, then added, My boys seem different since you arrived. Calmer. Somehow. Even Samuel has been speaking more. The observation warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. They're good boys. They just needed some structure, some caring attention. Something I've been unable to provide, apparently, he said, a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. That's not what I meant, Zara protested. You're raising 5 sons alone while running a ranch. That's more than most men could manage. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition of struggle, of doing the best one could with the hand life had dealt. Thank you for that, he said softly. Good night, Zara. Good night, Dawson. After he left, Zara stood motionless in the kitchen, her hands still covered in flour, her heart beating a rhythm that felt dangerously like hope. It was foolish, she knew. She was his housekeeper, nothing more. Any kindness he showed was simple appreciation for her work with his sons. Besides, she reminded herself bitterly, she was barren, a fact that had made her worthless in her husband's eyes. What man would want a woman who couldn't give him children, especially a man who already had 5 sons, living proof of his virility and another woman's fertility? Zara washed her hands, tidied the kitchen, and retired to her small room, determined to put such thoughts from her mind. She had a position, a roof over her head, and work that gave her purpose. It was more than she had dared hope for when she arrived in Promise Creek. It would have to be enough. As summer stretched into autumn, life at the Circle R fell into a comfortable pattern. Timothy's arm healed well, and the initial awkwardness between Zara and Dawson gave way to a quiet camaraderie. The boys thrived under her care, their wildness tempered by her gentle guidance. Even Samuel began to open up, seeking her out for stories before bedtime and helping her in the kitchen garden. Zara found herself loving the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings, with dew still clinging to the grass, the satisfaction of a well-cooked meal appreciated by hungry workers, the quiet evenings when the boys would gather in the main room while she mended, and Dawson read aloud from one of the few books they owned. It was during one such evening in late September that the peace was shattered. They had just finished dinner when the sound of approaching horses drew them outside. 3 riders thundered into the yard, their mounts lathered and blowing. "Reed!" called the lead rider, a burly man Zara recognized as one of the neighboring ranchers. "Got trouble. Carson's men cut your fence line along the east border. They're driving their cattle onto your grazing land." Dawson's face hardened. "How many men?" "6, armed. They're saying that waterhole belongs to Carson now." Without a word, Dawson strode to the gun cabinet, removing his rifle and checking it with practiced movements. "Zachary, Joseph, get the horses saddled. Luke, fetch my saddlebags from the barn." "You can't be serious," Zara said, stepping forward. "You're outnumbered." Dawson barely glanced at her. "This is ranch business, Zara. Stay with the boys." "At least wait for the sheriff." "Sheriff's 2 hours' ride from here," one of the men interrupted. "By then, Carson's men will have established their claim." Zara watched helplessly as Dawson and his older sons prepared to ride out. This wasn't Boston, where disputes were settled in courtrooms with lawyers and judges. This was the frontier, where a man defended what was his or lost it to those willing to take it by force. "Be careful," she said to Dawson as he mounted his horse. "The boys need you." Something flickered in his eyes at her words. "I'll be back by morning." "Keep the doors locked." After they rode away, Zara herded Timothy and Samuel inside, trying to project a calmness she didn't feel. She set the boys to their evening chores, then checked that all the doors and windows were secured. "Is Pa going to be all right?" Samuel asked as she tucked him into bed later that night. Zara smoothed his dark curls away from his forehead. "Your father's a smart man, Samuel. He knows how to take care of himself." "Ma didn't come back," the boy whispered, his voice small in the darkness. "She went away and never came back." The simple statement, laden with a child's grief, struck Zara to the core. She sat on the edge of Samuel's bed, gathering her thoughts. "Your mother didn't want to leave you," she said finally. Sometimes things happen that we can't control, but your father will come back, I promise." Samuel's small hand found hers. "Will you stay? Even if Pa doesn't come back?" The question caught her off guard. "Of course I'll stay until your father returns. Now go to sleep." But as she left Samuel's room, his question echoed in her mind. Would she stay? Could she make a life here, caring for another woman's children? And what of Dawson? In the months she had known him, he had never shown any interest in her beyond that of an employer to a valued employee. Zara spent a restless night, startling at every sound, imagining the worst. When dawn broke with no sign of the men, her anxiety only grew. She went through the motions of preparing breakfast, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for Timothy and Samuel. It was mid-morning when they finally heard horses approaching. Zara rushed outside, the boys close behind her, to find Dawson, Zachary, and Joseph riding slowly into the yard. Dawson's shirt was torn and bloodied, and Joseph sported a darkening bruise on his cheek. "What happened?" Zara demanded as she helped Dawson dismount. He leaned heavily on her, grimacing with pain. "Carson's men were waiting for us," he said through gritted teeth. "Ambush, got shot at, bullet grazed my side." Zara's heart raced as she helped him into the house and onto a kitchen chair. "Zachary, fetch my sewing kit and the medical supplies. Joseph, heat water. Timothy, bring clean towels." With practiced efficiency, she cut away Dawson's shirt to reveal a bloody furrow along his ribs. The wound was not deep, but it needed cleaning and stitching. "This will hurt," she warned as she prepared a needle and thread. Dawson managed a strained smile. "Not my first bullet wound, Zara." She worked carefully, cleaning the wound with whiskey, which made him hiss through clenched teeth, then stitching it closed with neat, even sutures. Throughout the procedure, his gaze never left her face, studying her with an intensity that made her hands almost tremble. "Where did you learn to stitch a wound like that?" he asked as she tied off the final suture. "My father was a doctor," Zara replied, applying a clean bandage. "He believed his daughters should know basic medical care, said it might save a life someday." "Might have saved mine," Dawson murmured, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and whiskey. "Seems I'm forever in your debt, Zara Byrne." She helped him to his feet. "You need rest. The wound isn't serious, but infection is always a risk." With Zachary's assistance, she got Dawson to his bedroom territory she had never entered before. It was spartanly furnished, with a large bed, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk. A woman's shawl hung on a peg by the door, a ghostly reminder of the wife and mother who had once lived there. After settling Dawson in bed and checking on Joseph's bruised face, Zara gathered the boys in the kitchen. "Your father will be fine," she assured them. "But he needs rest. I need you all to continue with your chores and stay close to the house. No riding out, no adventures. Understood?" They nodded solemnly, even Samuel, who had been unusually quiet since the men's return. The next few days fell into a new routine. Zara divided her time between her usual duties and caring for Dawson, changing his bandages, preparing broths and teas to help him regain his strength, and reading to him when restlessness made him irritable. It was during one such reading session, as autumn rain pattered against the bedroom window, that Dawson interrupted her. "Why did your marriage end?" "Zara." She lowered the book, startled by the abrupt question. "That's a rather personal inquiry." "I reckon after you've seen a man half naked and stitched his hide back together, there's not much left that's too personal." His blue eyes held hers, challenging and curious. Zara closed the book, her fingers tracing the worn leather binding. "My husband divorced me because I couldn't give him children," she said finally, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. 8 years of marriage, and my womb remained empty. The doctors in Boston declared me barren. Henry couldn't abide the thought of no heir for his business, so he discarded me. Dawson was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "This Henry," he said eventually, "sounds like a fool." The unexpected response made her laugh, a short, surprised sound. Most would say he was practical. A barren woman is of little use to a man wanting a family. "Is that what you believe?" Dawson pushed himself up against the pillows, wincing slightly at the movement. "That your worth lies solely in your ability to bear children?" The directness of his question struck her like a physical blow. "It's what society believes," she evaded. "I didn't ask about society. I asked about you." Zara stood, moving to the window to gaze out at the rain-soaked landscape. "What I believe doesn't matter. The fact remains that I failed in the one duty expected of a wife." She heard the creak of the bed as Dawson shifted position. "Look at me, Zara." Reluctantly, she turned to face him. "A woman is more than her womb," he said, his voice low and intense. "My wife gave me 5 sons, and I loved her for it. But I also loved her mind, her spirit, her heart. If she had given me no children, she would still have been Christine, and I would still have loved her." The raw honesty in his voice made Zara's throat tighten. "You were fortunate then, to have loved so completely." "Yes," he agreed, "I was, and I've spent 6 years raising her sons, trying to honor her memory." He paused, studying Zara's face. "But lately I found myself thinking that perhaps there might be room in life for a second chance at happiness." Zara's heart stuttered in her chest. Was he speaking in generalities, or was there a more personal meaning behind his words? Before she could respond, Samuel appeared in the doorway, his small face troubled. "Pa, are the bad men coming back?" The moment broken, Dawson turned his attention to his youngest son. "No, Samuel, they won't be back. Sheriff's got them locked up in town." As Samuel climbed onto the bed beside his father, Zara slipped from the room, her thoughts in turmoil. Dawson's words had stirred something inside her, a dangerous hope that perhaps, despite her barrenness, she might still have value as a woman, as a potential partner. But such thoughts were foolish. Dawson had his sons, his legacy already secured. What need had he for a woman who couldn't give him more children? Over the next week, as Dawson recovered and returned to his duties around the ranch, Zara found herself avoiding being alone with him. She focused on her work, on the boys, on preparing for the coming winter. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white silence. Zara stood on the porch, watching the flakes drift down, when she felt rather than heard Dawson approach. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, coming to stand beside her. "The first snow always makes the world seem new." Zara nodded, painfully aware of his proximity. "The boys are excited. Samuel has never seen snow before, at least not that he remembers." "Zara," Dawson's voice had a note of determination in it. "We need to talk." She kept her gaze fixed on the falling snow. "About what?" "About why you've been avoiding me since I recovered. About what I said that day in my bedroom." "You were feverish," Zara said quickly. "People say many things when they're not well. I wasn't feverish, and you know it." He turned to face her, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I meant what I said, about second chances." Zara's heart pounded against her ribs. "Dawson, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "When Christine died, I thought that part of my life was over. I had my boys, my ranch. It was enough. But then you came, with your quiet strength and your caring heart, and suddenly it wasn't enough anymore." He took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her cold fingers. "The boys adore you. Samuel speaks more to you than he has to anyone since his mother died. And I find myself watching for you, listening for your step, thinking of ways to make you smile." Zara shook her head, pulling her hand away. "You don't understand. I can't give you what a wife should. I'm barren, Dawson. The doctors were very clear." "Did they examine you thoroughly, try different treatments?" "For 3 years," Zara admitted. "Nothing worked. Henry became impatient." Dawson's jaw tightened. 3 years isn't so long, and doctors can be wrong. Even if they are, I'm 26 now. The chances grow slimmer with each passing year. I have 5 sons, Zara. I don't need more children. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. What I need is a partner, someone to share my life, to help raise my boys, to be by my side as we grow old together. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm not asking for an answer now. Just think about it. Think about staying. Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. Before she could respond, a snowball splattered against the porch railing, followed by the sound of boyish laughter. Dawson stepped back, a rueful smile touching his lips. Think about it, he repeated, then turned to chase after his sons, leaving Zara standing alone on the porch, her thoughts whirling like the snowflakes around her. That night, after the boys were asleep, Zara sat by the fire in the main room, a half-mended shirt forgotten in her lap. Dawson's proposal for that was what it had been, however informal, had shaken her to her core. Could she do it? Could she become a wife again? A mother to 5 boys who had already lost one mother? Could she bear it if, despite Dawson's assurances, he grew to resent her inability to give him more children? And yet, the thought of leaving the Circle R, of returning to her sister's empty cabin or seeking work elsewhere, filled her with a profound sadness. Somewhere along the way, these rough and tumble boys had claimed a piece of her heart. And Dawson, with his quiet strength and unexpected tenderness, had awakened feelings she had thought long dead after Henry's rejection. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Dawson stood in the doorway, watching her with those penetrating blue eyes. "May I join you?" he asked. Zara nodded, setting aside her mending as he took a seat in the chair opposite hers. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began hesitantly. "About marriage. And..." His voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that you'll come to regret your choice, that one day you'll look at me and see only what I can't give you." Dawson leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Zara, I've had the joy of fatherhood 5 times over. I've held my sons as newborns, watched them grow. That blessing has already been mine." He paused, his gaze steady on her face. "But I've also known the emptiness of a cold bed, of decisions made alone, of having no one to share my thoughts with at the end of the day. That's the emptiness I'm asking you to fill." His words touched something deep inside her, a longing she had barely acknowledged even to herself. And the boys, how would they feel about this? A smile tugged at Dawson's lips. "I may have already discussed it with them. Zachary thinks it's a fine idea. Joseph is cautious, but willing. Timothy and Luke are mainly concerned about whether you'll still make those apple dumplings they like. And Samuel asked if he could call you Ma." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. "He did?" Dawson nodded. "That boy has barely spoken of his mother in 6 years, but he wants you to be his Ma." He reached across the space between them, offering his hand. "What do you say, Zara Byrne? Will you marry me, barren or fertile, for better or worse, till death do us part?" Zara looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, open, honest, hopeful. In that moment, all her fears seemed small compared to the chance for happiness that lay before her. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his. "Yes, I will marry you, Dawson Reed." His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the plains full of promise and new beginnings. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Promise Creek, with the boys as their witnesses, and Martha Wilkes beaming from the front pew. The town had turned out in force, curious about the barren Easterner who had captured Dawson Reed's heart. Winter settled over the Circle R, transforming the ranch into a world of white and blue shadows. Inside the ranch house, warmth and laughter flourished. Zara found her place as Dawson's wife and the boy's stepmother, her days filled with the myriad tasks of running a household, and her nights spent in the tender embrace of her husband. It was in late January, as a blizzard howled outside, that Zara first suspected something had changed. The nausea came in waves, usually in the morning, accompanied by a strange fatigue that left her longing for afternoon naps, something she had never indulged in before. At first, she dismissed it as a winter illness, perhaps something she had caught from the boys. But as January turned to February and the symptoms persisted, a wild, impossible hope began to take root in her heart. She said nothing to Dawson, afraid to raise hopes that might be crushed. Instead, she consulted Martha Wilkes, who had raised 6 children of her own and served as the town's unofficial midwife before a proper doctor had settled in Promise Creek. "How long since your monthly courses?" Martha asked bluntly after Zara had hesitantly described her symptoms. "Almost 3 months," Zara admitted, her cheeks warming at the personal nature of the conversation. Martha nodded sagely. "And the nausea, the tiredness, the tenderness in your breasts?" "Yes, all of those." The older woman's face broke into a wide smile. "Well, Miss Barron from Boston, it seems those fancy doctors back east were wrong. You're carrying a child, Zara Reed. I'd stake my reputation on it." Zara's hand flew to her stomach, flat still beneath her woolen dress. "Are you certain? It couldn't be. Something else?" "Could be," Martha conceded. "But I've seen enough women in your condition to recognize the signs. You should tell that husband of yours. He'll be over the moon." That evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Zara sat with Dawson before the fire, her hands trembling slightly as she worked up the courage to speak. "Dawson," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." He looked up from the ledger he had been reviewing, his expression immediately concerned. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "Not unwell exactly." Zara took a deep breath. Martha thinks I'm with child." The ledger slipped from Dawson's fingers, falling to the floor with a thud. "With child," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "You're certain? As certain as one can be without a doctor's confirmation." "All the signs are there." She watched his face anxiously, searching for his reaction. "I know we agreed that it didn't matter, that you had your sons already, but—" Her words were cut off as Dawson crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that took her breath away. "A baby," he murmured against her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." When he set her down, Zara was startled to see tears in his eyes. "You're happy then?" she asked, though the answer was written plainly on his face. Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Not because I needed another child, but because this is a gift I never thought to give you, the chance to be a mother in every sense of the word." Zara covered his hand with hers, marveling at the miracle growing beneath their joined fingers. "The doctors were so sure," she whispered. "They said it was impossible." Dawson's smile was tender as he brushed a kiss against her forehead. "Perhaps it just took the right man," he teased gently. "Or perhaps," Zara said thoughtfully, "it took the right place, the right time. A new beginning." They told the boys the next morning over breakfast. Their reactions ranged from Zachary's quiet congratulations to Joseph's thoughtful nodding to Timothy and Luke's excited questions about whether it would be a brother or sister. But it was Samuel's response that brought tears to Zara's eyes. "Does this mean I won't be the baby anymore?" he asked, his small face serious. Zara knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "You'll always be your father's youngest son, Samuel. But now you'll be a big brother too. That's a very important job." The boy considered this, then nodded solemnly. "I'll be a good brother. I'll teach the baby everything I know." "I'm sure you will," Zara said, her heart full to bursting with love for this child, who was not of her body but had become so completely hers in heart. As winter gave way to spring, Zara's body changed, her slender frame softening, her belly rounding with the new life within. Dawson watched these changes with a mixture of wonder and protectiveness, insisting she rest more and taking on additional help for the heavier household chores. The boys, too, became protective, arguing over who would fetch water or carry firewood so Zara wouldn't have to. Even Samuel developed a habit of bringing her small treasures, a pretty stone, a wild flower, a feather. "For the baby," he would say, placing them solemnly in her hand. By summer, Zara's condition was unmistakable. She moved more slowly now, one hand often resting on the swell of her abdomen, feeling the strong kicks and movements of the child within. Dawson would often join her in this communion, his large hand spanning her belly, his face alight with wonder when the baby responded to his touch or voice. "I never experienced this with Christine," he confessed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She was always private about her pregnancies. Didn't like to be touched or fussed over. "I can't imagine not wanting to share this," Zara said, guiding his hand to where the baby was particularly active. "It feels like a miracle every day." Dawson's eyes, when they met hers, held such depth of feeling that it took her breath away. "You are a miracle, Zara Reed. You brought life back to this house, to my sons, to me." As her time grew near, Martha Wilkes moved into the ranch house to help with the birth. The boys were sent to stay with neighbors despite their protests, with Dawson promising to fetch them as soon as their new sibling arrived. Labor began on a sweltering August evening, the heat making Zara's discomfort even greater. Dawson paced outside the bedroom door as Martha and the town's doctor attended to his wife, his face growing more haggard with each passing hour as Zara's cries echoed through the house. "First babies often take their time," Martha assured him when she emerged to fetch more hot water. "Your wife is strong. She's doing beautifully." Dawn was breaking when the bedroom door finally opened, and the doctor emerged, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a tired smile on his face. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed," he said, extending his hand. "You have a daughter. A strong, healthy little girl." Dawson's legs nearly buckled with relief. "And Zara?" "Exhausted but well. She's asking for you." Inside the bedroom, Zara lay propped up on pillows, her face pale but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as Dawson entered, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Come meet your daughter," she whispered. Dawson approached the bed with reverent steps, his gaze fixed on the tiny face peeking from the blankets. The baby had a dusting of dark hair and skin still flushed from the effort of being born. "She's perfect," he breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Just like her mother." Zara shifted the bundle, placing their daughter in Dawson's arms. He held the infant with the confidence of a man who had done this before, but the wonder in his eyes was as fresh as if this were his firstborn. "What shall we name her?" Zara asked, watching father and daughter with a heart so full it seemed it might burst. Dawson thought for a moment, his finger gently tracing the baby's cheek. "Hope," he said finally, "because that's what she is. Hope for new beginnings." "Hope Reed," Zara tested the name, smiling. "It's perfect." When the boys returned later that day, they filed into the bedroom with unusual quietness, their eyes wide as they gathered around the bed to meet their sister. "She's so small," Luke marveled. "She'll grow," Zachary assured him. "Remember how small Samuel was?" Samuel, who had been hanging back, moved closer at the mention of his name. "Can I hold her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. With Dawson's help, Samuel was settled in a chair, his arms positioned to support the baby's head. Hope opened her eyes as she was transferred to her brother's arms, her gaze seeming to fix on his face. "She knows who you are," Zara told him. "She knows you're her big brother." Samuel's solemn expression melted into a smile of pure joy. "Hello, Hope," he said. "I'm Samuel. I've been waiting for you." In that moment, watching her family gathered around her, her husband, her stepsons, her newborn daughter Zara, felt a sense of completeness she had never thought to experience. From the brokenness of her past, a new family had formed, stronger perhaps because of the fractures that had brought them together. The years ahead would bring challenges, she knew. Raising 6 children on a frontier ranch would never be easy. But as she caught Dawson's eye over their children's heads and saw the love and promise reflected there, Zara knew with bone-deep certainty that she had found her place in the world. She had been called barren and cast aside, deemed worthless by a man too shallow to see her true value. But Dawson Reed had seen what others had missed: the strength, the love, the capacity for motherhood that had always been within her, waiting for the right soil in which to bloom. And bloom she had, into a life richer and more fulfilling than she had ever dared to dream. 5 years later, Zara stood on the porch of the Circle R, watching as Dawson taught young Hope to ride her first pony. At 5, their daughter was fearless, her dark hair flying behind her as the pony trotted around the corral, her father walking alongside with a steadying hand. Beside them, 3-year-old Faith clapped her hands in delight, eager for her turn, while baby Grace, not yet a year old, cooed in Zara's arms. The boys' young men now moved about their chores with the confidence of those who knew their place in the world. Zachary, at 20, was Dawson's right hand in running the ranch. Joseph, 18, had a gift with horses that had earned him a reputation throughout the territory. Timothy, 15, was the scholar of the family, his nose often buried in books ordered from back east. Luke, 13, showed a talent for working with his hands, crafting furniture and tools that rivaled those of men twice his age. And Samuel, 11, had become Hope's devoted protector and teacher, patient beyond his years. As the Wyoming sun cast long shadows across the land they had made their own, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the shame and rejection of her first marriage to the joy and fulfillment of her life with Dawson and their blended family, it had been a path of unexpected turns and blessings. "What are you thinking about, wife?" Dawson asked, coming to stand beside her after settling Hope safely on the ground. "You've got that far-away look in your eyes." Zara smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I was thinking about how life takes us where we're meant to be, even when the path seems darkest." Dawson's arm tightened around her waist. "If you're talking about that fool of a first husband of yours, I owe him a debt of gratitude. His loss was most definitely my gain." "Our gain," Zara corrected, gesturing to their sprawling family. "I was called barren and sent away, but look what grew from that rejection: this family, this love." "You were never barren, Zara Reed," Dawson said, placing a gentle hand on Grace's downy head. "You were simply waiting for the right place to plant your seeds." As their children's laughter echoed across the ranch yard, Zara knew he was right. She had found her fertile ground here, in this wild and beautiful place, with this man who had seen her worth when others had not. Together, they had created a legacy more precious than either could have imagined alone, not just in the children they had borne together, but in the family they had forged from separate paths, brought providentially together. In the end, it wasn't about the children her body could or couldn't produce. It was about the love that had flourished in the most unexpected place, the wild, untamed heart of Wyoming, where a barren woman and a widowed cowboy with 5 sons had found in each other exactly what they needed to become whole.